Next, a look at the web and geopolitics from Nitin.
With the exception of Nick Going, you'll realize that the panelists from the mainstream media are missing at this session. They're very busy people, but they don't know what they're missing. You know, you've heard a lot of detail about Web 2.0 public diplomacy. What I'm going to try and do is put this in context. I'm going to make 3 points. The first point is that the proliferation of Web 2.0, especially social networks on mobile internet platforms, have profoundly changed international politics. They've created new, hitherto ununderstood, imagined communities. These new communities have their own new types of politics and political structures. And the biggest challenge and the biggest new event which we're going to see in the future, in the near future actually, would be how these new imagined communities interact with existing communities like nation states and the politics which comes out of this, and how this changes international politics and therefore how it influences public diplomacy. Let me get into these points in detail. Benedict Anderson, a very famous scholar of international relations, made this argument that the modern nation state, countries and nation states as we know of them today, arose because of the proliferation of the printing press. The printing press made information easy, cheap, democratized information, so people could organize themselves into communities around languages, around religion, and along ethnicities. But this process was eased by the printing press. What we are seeing today is the proliferation of the internet. It has globalized information, it has made it easy for everyone to access information, and thereby it has created new imagined communities, to use Anderson's phrase. And I like to call these new communities Netions, because what they are is they are communities organized on the internet around common values, common commitments, common ambitions, common agenda, and very often common grievances. Now, when you have these communities organized in this fashion, like any other political community, they would have a common norms, they would have norms within the community, they would have a culture within that community, and they would have politics within the community, and these communities would evolve their own political structures. To give you an example to make it real, Facebook has 500 million users, as you found out today. But within Facebook, there are Facebook communities, there are pages, there are groups, and the Texas Hold'em poker group has more members than the Barack Obama group. That gives you a sense of how people organize themselves. So Manchester United Football Club can form a community, and let's say a Manchester United fan is assaulted somewhere in South America in a match. You could have repercussions thereof in other parts of the world, because the Manchester United community would probably be interacting with the Liverpool community somewhere else, and they have these clashes, and you would have interactions between communities which you would never have heard, because they have their own culture, their own norms, their politics, and their structures, and their conflicts. Now, what does this mean for international politics? The first and the most important thing is that these communities, in a way, are supranational. They transcend national boundaries. They're extraterritorial. They're everywhere. And they have degrees of sovereignty. In other words, they can act as nations do. WikiLeaks is a classic example. What WikiLeaks did would probably be illegal in almost all countries of the world, but he just did it because he could. That's what nation states do. Nation states take actions because they can. So as we go along this direction, we'll find more and more communities being able to act in sovereign or semi-sovereign ways. And when you have nations acting in sovereign ways, interacting with each other in politics of nations, and nations acting with existing international communities like nation states, international organizations, you would have another kind of dynamic. So now, how these two sets of politics interact with each other is a big story which we're going to see in the next few years. I don't know how it's going to play out, WikiLeaks is probably one example. Although I think MJ Akbar, who was here, he got it wrong when he said Assange is a hero, because I think Assange is an arrogant fool. Because nobody would want, leaking information, leaking information of wrongdoing, illegality, unethical behavior, immoral behavior in instances where there is no legal recourse. There is some moral justification to this. But when you indiscriminately leak information, you have 20,000 memos, there's absolutely no way anyone could have looked at each of them and try and make sense whether this is unethical, immoral, or it's just normal correspondence. It's very difficult to look at this from a moral point of view. But Assange could do it. And therein lies this point. How is the existing nation states, how are the existing diplomatic establishments able to engage and work in this new environment? Now we have ambassadors to different countries of the world. We have an ambassador, India has an ambassador to Papua New Guinea. But we don't have an ambassador to a Facebook community which has more people than the Papua New Guinea. We don't have an ambassador to a Facebook community which has a per capita income of Switzerland. How can we, change our diplomatic thinking, our diplomatic processes and norms to address these new nations? Thank you.